Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. We have a terrific guest today. His name is David Barse, and I've known him for a very long time, and I've gotten much sage advice from him on a lot of the things that I actually deal with in my life, both personally and professionally. A little bit about my friend David. He's founder and chief executive officer of XOUT Capital. He's also the founder of DMB Holdings, a private family office. He was CEO of Third Avenue Management for 25 years, so he had a very long run there. My favorite thing about him is he's the executive producer for the Academy Award-winning, Grammy-winning Best Documentary, Summer of Soul, which is about a legendary 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival, which celebrated African-American music and culture and promoted Black pride and unity. And that just obviously is streaming everywhere now, and we'll get into that conversation later. He's always been giving back his whole life. Now he's working on the director and member of the executive committee for the City Parks Foundation. He's on the Big Apple chapter of YPO, which I also serve on. So welcome, David. I mean, I could go longer, but we got to get this podcast going, but welcome and thanks so much for coming.
It's my true honor and privilege to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, you know, your career spans a long time, you know, ultra successful person, had ups and downs throughout your career. But, you know, it's very interesting. You know, the market's down 800 points there, right? We're old enough to have been through a couple cycles, you and me. So you've experienced these crashes, right? You've been around, you know what they feel like in your career, you know, especially even right when you're out of law school, you had one as well. So what do you feel the lessons you've learned, and how should people think about what's going on right now?
You know, I think the challenge for most folks who haven't been in the business that long is because this has been such a long run since the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, most younger folks have not experienced this kind of market volatility and turmoil that hasn't, you know, that's lasted a little bit of time. And it's clear this is going to be a little longer lasting. I think the lessons for me, having been through a number of these cycles and from starting out in the business from a position of being on the distress side of the market, because I entered the market as a distressed investor, being a bankruptcy lawyer by background, is not.
And when was that? Just so the audience.
Yeah, so I graduated law school in 1987. I clerked for a bankruptcy judge and then went to work for a law firm that represented just creditors in reorganizations, and started working in September of 1987. And in October of 1987, the stock market crashed. So the next 3 years were the fallout from that event. That's an important lesson. Next 3 years, let's emphasize that, right? Stock market crashes in October, but for 3 years, you had to deal with the aftermath of that. A lot of folks don't appreciate how long some of these periods can last. But what it teaches you is not to panic, right? There are ways you can position yourself. Obviously, the value of your portfolio will move in line with the markets. And if you watch it on a day-to-day basis, it can be uncomfortable for folks. It could create moods. You know, you might find a guest who's in this kind of industry and the market's down 800 points. He doesn't want to talk to you, John. Like, I don't want to do this podcast. Can we hang
I'm
up
glad
right
you
now?
actually.
I mean, you started off with like bad news. You want to bring me down right at the beginning, but the reality is, as someone who's been through a number of these, you just don't panic, and you just recognize that you got to position yourself for these periods, and sometimes when there is blood on the streets, it's when the best opportunities present themselves. So over my career, that has been one of the stalwarts of my success has been when these market environments present themselves. It's not a time to panic. It's actually a time to be thoughtful and put into position opportunities that where the pricing might not always be available. And a lot of this is always about price, what we call price discovery, right? True price discovery.
And, what I love about your sort of career, you sort of follow, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but even with XOUT, like your whole premise is taking out people or companies that don't change and like saying you're out, right? And you're always looking at who's making those moves, especially in these environments. But okay, so you did that for 3 years, and then when did Third Avenue appear in your life?
Yeah, so representing creditors, there was a robust market that got created in distressed securities in the early 90s. And I ended up fashioning myself as an attorney to that community, mostly populated by hedge funds. In fact, most Wall Street firms did not have trading desks yet set up to transact in distressed securities because it was all off market or over the counter market transactions, primarily between banks who owned loans and hedge funds who had capital to invest in those loans. And ultimately was offered a position to join one of the deans of that investing community, a gentleman named Marty Whitman, who had written a number of books about distressed investing. And I went to work for him and built the firm from scratch. He had a broker-dealer operation, which he operated under the name MJ Whitman, but we created an asset management franchise. Such clever fellows were we that our offices were located on Third Avenue in Manhattan, that we branded and named our firm Third Avenue Management. And from scratch, was able to grow that organization to a $31 billion asset management franchise at its peak, just as the financial crisis came upon us in the fall of 2008.
Wow. So there you go. It's 2008. You got this, gigantic, not only responsibility, but, assets under management. And you said in another interview that your role as a mutual fund manager until 2008 and the financial crisis happened, was good. And then your role changed. First of all, how did it change? And then how did it change you? Because, as much as we, go through this, like if you don't figure out what the learning moment is or where this takes you, it's sort of for naught.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer in just the time we have for this podcast, but I would tell you that the fragility of business really comes into clear focus when there are these kinds of events. So your first question was what lessons did I learn? You learn to be patient, and you learn to be thoughtful in the way in which you protect yourself and take advantage of opportunities. But when it happens, it's also a recognition of, creating a business takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a little bit of luck, but the business could disappear overnight. And it's fascinating to have that kind of experience. So our assets, as I said, 31 billion in September of 2008. In February of 2009, 10 billion. So in 6 months, I wiped out 2/3 of, well, I didn't, but the market did, wiped out 2/3 of the assets we had under management, which is the standard test by which you measure all things in the asset management business, performance and obviously AUM. But 6 months to have 2/3 of it disappear is quite a shocking event. And so how did that change me? It changed me by recognizing how fragile business is and how important it is when those kinds of environments occur. Ultimately, some are out of your control, some are in your control, but your only thing you're left with is your reputation, right? So we had already achieved, unbelievable success. And by the way, along the way, I also monetized the business because we sold a good chunk of it, a majority of it, in fact, to a publicly traded asset management business. So there was a monetization event along the way before that event. And then your reputation is really all that matters, because you are responsible. You're a fiduciary for other people's money, and you want to be able to do your best to protect that and be completely transparent about risks that are being taken. So that was another takeaway, right? How important your reputation is when you have an event like that occur.
Well, because it's easy when things are going good, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's why things take so long to actually learn these lessons, because, things don't happen overnight, right? They take time.
Yeah. I mean, look, in today's world, let's just talk about today, since you brought it up at the start. Target announced their earnings yesterday. Brian Cornell is viewed as one of the top retail CEOs in this marketplace, right? Sort of well thought of. Everyone considers him maybe one of the best, if not the best, retail CEO. They missed. They have unanticipated, as he said it, unanticipated costs of what could be $1 billion just in transportation for merchandise that they distribute and sell. The market slaughtered him for that. He lost 25% of the value of the stock in one morning so far, right? Does that feel fair and right? Should the market have had none of that priced in previously? Or is it even fair to take 25% of the market cap of that company out for just that one thing? Again, how do you think Brian Cornell feels right now? I'm sure he's not happy about it. And I'm sure he's not happy about the way the market's reacted. But at the end of the day, what he's going to be judged for is how transparent and clear he is to the market about what these challenges are, and how he's going to contend with them on a go-forward basis to build back. When we're not talking about shoppers, we're talking about shareholders, owners, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic that people are facing all day, every day. And I just had my own experience with it.
Yeah, he owned it, which I guess what you're saying, because I'm going back to circle back to saying you went from 31 to 10. I mean, you had to own it. I mean, part of having relationships is owning what you are. So, I thought he did. And is that sort of the tact you took? I mean, because you described the next 7 years after the crisis, right, that you went through was torture. You've said that many occasions. Yes. And why did you stick it out? I mean, not many people would.
It's a good question. Again, a lot of what occurred out of the financial crisis was some of the same opportunities that I mentioned earlier. There was blood on the streets, right? There were a number of companies, good companies, unfortunately, that were improperly financed or too leveraged to sustain their balance sheets, and as a result went into financial distress. And those opportunities were rampant. It was almost, I've also said at that time, it was like shooting fish in the barrel. If you invested in the appropriate fulcrum security, being that security in the capital structure that was going to participate in a company's reorganization. So generally senior debt or debt with collateral that you could own at discounts to par, right? That opportunity was wildly available if you had capital. The problem was raising capital at a time when...
It's always not there when you need.
Right, exactly. But I did launch a fund in the summer of 2009, actually boldly went on CNBC and announced the launch of a credit fund, which was something we hadn't done at Third Avenue, and described that opportunity. And it became a place for our investors to go and give us the ability to take advantage of that marketplace. The torture was with the other side of our business. The other side of our business was an ATM machine, primarily invested in publicly traded equity securities, global, and had daily liquidity. So investors can take their money out every day, any day they wanted to, and most did. And that continued for an extended period of time. I've been quoted as saying 7 years. It now feels like 7 years until I left the firm. It was a real challenge. And I think the way I changed was not the same as the way the portfolio managers who were responsible for some of these funds. Let's be clear. I was not making investment decisions for each and every portfolio, right? I was managing the people who were making investment decisions. On me was the hiring of those people, right? It was my decision to put these people in the seats, but they weren't changing and evolving, in part because of the disciplined nature in which they were trained to invest. And that became the torture, right? The conflict of unwillingness to change when the environment had drastically changed created a real conflict. And so ultimately, performance speaks for itself, and investors made the decision that they have a right to make, which is to walk, right? And so the firm just continued to deteriorate, and ultimately, its demise is now a part of history. It's no longer the firm that it was.
All right. So I know, I happen to know you personally. And I know, you're a terrific guy that's always thinking and helping people. So here you are, the top, and then boom, right? Like you said, mostly not in your control. And you were there to like 25 years. This is not a little amount of time. So how did you psychologically get through that moment?
With a lot of soul searching and coaching and really the way we know each other is through YPO. For those who don't know and appreciate YPO, it's an organization that has a lot of benefits, but one of the most significant benefits is what we call forum, where you have an opportunity to, in effect, become part of a group like it's your own private board of directors. And in our case, eight other individuals who were a member of my forum became my private board of directors, if you will, almost my advisory committee. So almost and religiously, like monthly.
And so everyone knows these are other CEOs at other companies in all different industries, coming at things in all different perspectives.
Right. And having that asset, that ability to consult with in the most confidential and intimate way with your deepest fears and your deepest desires and your deepest accolades, right? It works both ways. You don't just share when things are going great, you share when things are going poorly. To have that and to be able to use that as a sounding board for decisions that ultimately I had to make was really one of the phenomenal ways in which I got through it. And I would tell you that was hugely relied upon. And I think that's what makes forum such a special thing. Ultimately, I made the decision to end up leaving the organization in the end of 2015. So my 25 years was enough, and I left the organization to be run by others because that was the right decision to be made at that time. And that was something that, again, through consultation with folks, really became the proper path.
Good. And, what I just heard was vulnerability and realizing that, asking for help and being helped is a tremendous asset in our lives. And, I think most people don't, some people look at that as a weakness. I look at it as your biggest strength, and that's why you are who you are. So, okay. So that happened. You made your decision. Hard, man, hard, long. That's a long time to be anywhere. And obviously, you made that decision. So then I'm sure you were, roaming around, you'll tell us, but what was the aha moment behind the new thing that you're doing, which is XOUT Capital, the index investing platform that you created? What made you even want to get back into it, right? I mean, here you are, you went through all that, whatever, pain, and you realize what you did want to do and didn't want to do. What made you sort of get back in?
So as part of my exit from the organization, I was prohibited from working in the industry for a couple of years. I had to sign a non-compete, take a garden leave. But once that garden leave expired, there were 3 insights that I had developed that were kind of just poking at me that I wanted to address once I made the decision to get back involved in the business. So insight number 1 was what I had seen occur since the financial crisis was a growth and a continued acceleration of growth of investors investing in passive index strategies. I ran a firm that was actively managed. We were selecting individual securities, concentrating in those securities on the theory that our approach of being active was going to outperform the market, whatever benchmark we used to measure that against. And we consistently failed. So I was watching and learning how passive strategies just continued to trounce active managers. And I wanted to be a part of that space. The second insight was, boy, these index passive funds are phenomenal vehicles, but they're flawed, fundamentally flawed, because they buy everything in an index. So it's indiscriminate. And once they've established what that index is, whether it's the S&P 500 or the Russell 2000 or the MSCI All World, it doesn't really matter. There are hundreds of securities inside those indices. They buy them all. And that's a flaw, because not every company in those indices is a good company or a company you want to own. And insight number 3 is, after watching my team fail to pick winners for so long, I came to the realization that it might actually be easier to simply exclude losers. Let's flip the entire investment paradigm on its head. Everyone on Wall Street is trained to pick winners. I'm going to flip that. Let's turn it into just exclude the losers. And if you think about it, John, like you played sports as a kid, I assume, right?
Yeah.
You would line up with your buddies and it was time to pick a team, 5-on-5 basketball, whatever it might have been. And, you kind of knew who maybe the best player was, but pretty much everyone knew who the worst player was, and no one was selecting that worst player.
It was my scariest moment that I wouldn't get picked. Every time that happened, I was like, it was like a bad nightmare.
So, it's like, I get it, but it was always easier to figure that out, and so if you just apply that simple sort of construct, it's true in a lot of things, but in investing in securities, it's definitely so much easier to identify what the bad companies are and so much harder to figure out what the good ones. So I took those 3 insights together and I created a methodology that's based on fundamental financial information. So we really want to know what companies are reporting publicly each and every quarter and measure that financial performance. But those fundamental metrics that we use to measure are merely established to identify the bad companies. So you started out by introducing XOUT to the audience. I can make it really simple for everyone. We take 7 fundamental metrics, highlight a couple. Revenue growth. How is a company actually growing its revenue? How is a company using its resources to buy back its stock? How is a company spending money on its research and development for the future? So we weed out from in the first case here for XOUT's first exchange traded fund, we weed out the 250 companies that perform the worst on those metrics. And there are 4 others that we use, but to simplify this, just by getting those fundamental scores each and every quarter, it tells us about companies that are failing to adapt to the ever-changing environment. And we believe the environment is ever-changing. It's never static. And so
I think it's even going faster than it ever has before, actually.
it's true. And look, Moore's law applies in the sense that computing power is growing at an exponential rate. And when quantum computing becomes the norm, which is not too far away, it'll become even faster. And the application of those processes is not even yet fully appreciated by our brains. And so I think the people who are in the technology field understand this. They're striving to be there first and foremost. Like Microsoft can't stop talking about quantum computing and what it's going to mean to their business down the road. But most people don't pay attention to it because they're too busy focusing on what interest rates are going to do, or whether we're going to be in inflation for an extended period of time, or whether a recession is going to come in. And that noise permeates the market and drives market sentiment. But the companies that are really thinking about the future aren't necessarily as focused on those issues as they are about how are we going to improve what we do better, faster, cheaper, and achieve even greater success than they've already achieved. And I think that gets lost. And that risk of technological change is the risk that we're trying to address with XOUT. And we think it's easier to address that risk, to basically take advantage of it by just eliminating losers, or in our parlance, Xing them out.
And what's interesting, I loved your 3 things you figured out over 25 years, right? And now you're trying to solve them in your next round of what you're going to do. And you still won't know if that's going to work either, which just shows how pivoting and, having a long-term goal, not being afraid to change is what's so important. You're proving that. And kudos to doing this. It's great that you're kicking back in and, trying to really figure out what you learned from your career to improve. And I'm looking forward to seeing that grow. I think, it's exciting having your little XOUT on an I guess it's an ETF, right? So
yes,
that's sort of cool, right? So that's not probably so easy to get done either. So
no, that's
right?
a whole nother podcast is how an outsider like myself enters into the ETF ecosystem and attempts to start a business from scratch, and the barriers that are in place to prevent something like that happening are fairly significant. So achieving just the success of getting it launched was a milestone. Having over 100 million in assets under management is a major milestone. Getting to the $1 billion level is my next goal, and if I achieve it, will be a tremendous milestone. So that's what I'm striving for.
Good. I'm hoping you do. But the cool thing is you're trying to solve a problem that you just didn't want to let go, and you're so much in belief of it, you're getting it done. So that's good. So now let's go to something like sort of off financial topic, but I just think the coolest thing ever, and it actually ruins the theory of myth of overnight success, which is, but we'll still talk about it, but it's unbelievable. And you'll probably give us reasons why it probably will never happen again and never happens. It's this somersault. I mean, here you are, obviously, always looking for good opportunities, and this thing comes, and why the hell did you even do it? And, to do it and then actually win, an Academy Award. And, I'd love to hear what it was like to be at the Academy Awards. So give us a little, background info on this.
Yeah. So, a lot of folks who are on Wall Street get propositioned or solicited for investment in theatrical endeavors, whether it's a movie or a Broadway show or podcasts even, right? This happens all the time. And so over time, I would be prospected, and it was always sort of like a fun thing to want to do because it's, theoretically cool to be, associated.
Well, it's fun.
With,
it's
right?
creative. It's entertainment.
Right. And a very good friend, in fact, my best man at my wedding and one of my oldest friends had been in the industry since he graduated from college. And every time I'd get a prospect, I'd send it to him. What should I do? He goes, throw it in the trash can. And I'm like, why? He goes, well, do you want to lose money or you're, because I thought you're in the business of making money. So if you want to lose money, invest in it, but it'll be a very expensive show to the premiere, ticket to the premiere. So I consistently listened to him and saved myself a lot of money because I think he was virtually 100% correct on every one of his advice. Like, it wasn't like he said to me, pass on Hamilton, Right. These were not, because obviously Hamilton goes to the lucky people, the people who won the lottery. So he finally comes to me one day and he says, I have a documentary film I want to make. I need help. I need money. And I said, okay, done. What's it about? Because here it was, like, for all this time, I've been waiting to do this. And he tells me it's about this, as you introduced at the beginning, a music festival that took place in Harlem in 1969 for a Black audience with mostly Black performers, and no one knew about this. And what intrigued me not about the idea, not just that it came from a trusted friend, but was you missed my proper title for City Parks Foundation. I'm actually the chairman.
Okay.
And as the chairman of the organization, one of my responsibilities is Summer Stage in New York. For those of the listeners who don't know about that, we put on free shows and ticketed shows, but at venues throughout the city, the 5 boroughs of New York. And in one venue we use is in Harlem in Marcus Garvey Park. And this is exactly the location where this music festival took place in 1969, which was a free show. So this was just dumb luck, right? I mean, he comes to me with this thing and I'm like, what are you talking about? This is my thing. I do this today, right? I put on free shows today. So I went and signed up and became his initial investor. And then he raised some money from some other family offices, and away we went in 2018, late 2018, early 2019. We started production. The first thing we had to do was hire a director. We hired Questlove, the drummer for the Roots and band leader for the Jimmy Fallon Show. He had never directed a film before, but he had been well known for his music knowledge and was also fascinated that there was this music festival he did not know about. And we started the process of taking the tape from these 6 days over the summer, these aggregated 45 hours of tape, and editing it down to what could be a music documentary. I think what changed the whole paradigm, it would have been, a great movie and a really cool documentary about musical performances, and then really how the music transformed itself over the summer. It went from gospel to rhythm and blues to Motown. Stevie Wonder was sort of a transitional thing. He was 19 at the time, but he started playing funkier stuff. And then Sly and the Family Stone, who were rock and roll, really, and were the only performers who performed that summer, both at the Harlem Cultural Festival and Woodstock, right? And so what changed was, in the midst of the production, which was primarily around, digitally recording the tape and then also just editing it down and selecting the right performances, was that 2 things happened. COVID came in February, March of 2020, and George Floyd was killed. And when George Floyd was killed, the dialogue in the country, not that it hadn't already occurred, but it really obviously melted up and in some places exploded, right? There were riots going on. Even New York had its own sets of issues. And for us, it became almost an obligation to change the arc of the movie to reflect that some of the challenges that had gone on in 1969 still permeated our society today. And that story needed to be told, because ultimately, one of the messages that we tried to give to everybody about this film was it was a bit of an erasure of Black culture and Black history. Why is Woodstock so well known? Why are there dozens of movies about Woodstock, books written, performances told over and over again, reshown in many places? And here you had arguably the equivalent talent, just Black talent, not getting any of the same recognition, and basically having those performances buried in somebody's basement for 50 years. So the erasure of that history had to be told and explained. And that was one of the goals of the film. And that's why the film achieved the critical acclaim that it got. It wasn't just about these musical performances, which in and of themselves, in certain instances, I still get teary-eyed. I've watched the movie 1,000 times. I tear up when I watch it, because you watch Nina Simone perform, and to the audience with whom she's performing, you go rewatch this movie. And for those of you who haven't watched it, watch it and remember these words. You will have to become emotionally connected to that performance because of what she's doing. The trailer gives you a little bit of that introduction. It sort of teases you a little bit with what she's doing, because we use her in the trailer. But if you watch her full performance, it's a miracle that a riot didn't begin at that moment, that she didn't incite people to storm the Capitol, likening it to what happened on January 6th of 2021, right? It's a testament to how beautiful the whole festival was and how meaningful it was to the community of Harlem and to Black people in total. So that story is why it won all the awards it won. And I was just fortunate to be a part of the process, but I was influential when the event occurred, because I can remember the day I picked up the phone and called my buddy who brought me the film and said, man, this is an opportunity for us to tell a very different story here. And that's what we did. And we used COVID because we were shut down in our production, to do more archival research. And one of the most interesting things we found was during one of those 6 performances, it was the day we landed, NASA landed the moon shuttle, so July of 1969. And the whole country was sort of overwhelmed with that news. First time landing on the moon, big deal. We found a clip of Walter Cronkite announcing this as breaking news, it went across your television. And he was choked up about it. CBS had sent a reporter to the Harlem Cultural Festival to interview people in the crowd. And he found this young Black man and he said, hey, we landed on the moon. What do you think? And the young Black man is like, who cares about landing on the moon? We need money for education. We need money for our kids. There's a lot of poverty here in Harlem. I don't care about landing on the moon. They should be spending money on us. Now, isn't that perspective?
Wow.
Because, right, we wouldn't have found that if we weren't in COVID. Like, it was just gave us more time to do things. And we found this little snippet of a news clip, and the message is very powerful. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's the fortuitousness of all these events occurring just kind of gave me the sense that we were going to be more than just a documentary. And by the way, 99.9% of documentaries produced lose money.
Wow. Well, listen, I mean, I could feel your passion, and what a great story and great movie, and must have been such a great learning process, right? First of all, you're learning sort of a new trade craft, right, with the entertainment world, but the whole archival, looking things up, I like ancestry.com. I love you learn all these things that we take for granted or that we don't know, and it's powerful. And it's funny also, all these little silver linings, COVID, made it better. COVID's the worst thing that could have ever happened. I can't believe it did. It's a tragedy, but it's nice that people are at least starting to see some silver linings for what, happened that could, was good?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, obviously there were certain things that got challenged. Like we wanted to interview Mavis Staples was one of the performers. We wanted to interview her and she couldn't travel. She's in her 80s. She didn't want to travel. So we wanted to come visit her in Chicago and interview her. She wouldn't let anyone come visit her because she was quarantining and not afraid to get COVID. Yep. So we send her an iPad, with a camera on it, and we're going to ask you these questions, and we'll do it by just the way you and I are talking now, in a Zoom fashion. And the iPad arrives at her apartment, and we get all set up, and she's like, "No, I don't like the way my hair looks. I'm not gonna do an on-camera thing." So her interview is only voice, right?
You could have shown her how to use the filters, right?
So for those of you, the inside joke on this is she just didn't like her hair that day, and that's why she wouldn't let us film her.
Good for her. At least she knows what she wants.
But yes, it was. But so it wasn't all like COVID was, because normally we would have had her.
No, listen, and there's pros and cons in everything, right?
Yeah. Before COVID, we got the Fifth Dimension in. So Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr., who are the lead performers of Fifth Dimension, and a couple, they're married. They hadn't seen themselves perform in 50 years. So we're showing them their tape of their performance for the first time. And we're filming that. And if you watch, you'll see their eyes.
It's so cool.
Right. Their eyes just lit up. So we missed out on doing that with the other performers who are still alive.
All right. Well, listen, life hasn't stopped yet. Maybe you got to do a little, after the movie, something like that. Do some more creative stuff. I'll come with you. I'd love to hang out and watch that.
They call those sequels.
Sequel. It doesn't even have to be one. So anyway, to finish, because, I don't want to spend your whole day here, even though I'd love to, because your stories are fascinating. How is it going to the Academy Awards?
So it's a great thing to do if you haven't done it. You
can go, but how is it?
You really can't go. Getting a ticket to the Academy Awards is like the
really
hardest thing in the world. First of all, there's no secondary market. This isn't like going to the Super Bowl where there's a price for everything. You can buy a Super Bowl.
Right.
You cannot sell your Academy Award ticket, and you only
get Willy Wonka and the golden ticket, right?
Yeah, you only get one if you're a nominee. So you can't get a ticket. So going to it it's a little bit of a narcissistic love fest, right? Because it's the people who are there are all the ones who are being nominated, and then there's those who are connected to the film, like I was, an executive producer, not an actual producer or director, right? And so your audience is capped and limited. It's really a made-for-TV thing, and so they end up just having a love fest about themselves, and I think for them, because the Academy is membered by all of the people, right? It's the producers, directors, and actors who make up the industry, and they're the ones voting for the winner, right? And so, so they're just voting on themselves, and it's a little bit of as I said, a narcissistic love fest. And for me, because I was there for our own endeavor, the experience was fun, and the after parties were a blast, but the event was tarnished. And it was tarnished because one announcer, a comedian named Chris Rock, decided to make a joke that upset another one of the actors, who decided to unscriptedly come up on stage and slap the guy in the face and then curse him out, which you didn't hear because it got blinked out by the television.
Oh my God.
This is happening while our award is being announced, right? So
your award? Wait a minute.
So this is your
award.
Yeah, this
was getting announced. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, this is a Jeopardy question from years
ago. Oh my God.
What award was being announced when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock? So, the spoiling of that moment for us, I'm going to be a little self-centered about it, right? This was our moment. We worked for years to get this. My friend, who was the lead producer, worked for 30 years of his career to get to this point. He had never been nominated for an Academy Award. Here he is. He's not just nominated, but he wins. And And he goes up on stage and he can't even think straight because of what just happened. Like everybody was,
Oh my God.
turned upside down. So just the selfishness of that moment for these people just made me crazy. And then, 15 minutes later, instead of, I don't know if did you see what happened at the Dave Chappelle show?
Yes.
So
yes.
some guy came up on stage,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And they took that guy backstage, and what they do to him, they beat the crap out of him, and he's been in jail since. What happened to Will Smith? He was told to sit down and relax, right? And then 15 minutes later, was called up on stage and accepted his own award, and they gave him a standing, applause. I was in the hallway watching it on TV because I came downstairs to celebrate,
Right.
and I was the only guy who booed. So all these people are looking at me. Who's that guy booing? I'm booing because I can't believe that this was allowed to occur. And so my perspective on this as an outsider was they're just so self-absorbed that they lost complete perspective of what had just happened. And what makes that even worse is, I don't know if you saw the New York Post yesterday reported that Chris Rock is being considered to be the MC of next year's Oscars. So instead of recognizing that maybe there were some improprieties on both parties' parts, right? They're going to award the guy with an opportunity to possibly host. Now, whether he agrees to do it or not remains to be seen, but Hollywood is just self-inflicting more wounds upon itself. And that's why I'm one and done with this project. It was like, how can I achieve better success? I don't think I can. I know I can't. And so this was fun and interesting.
Right. But what I like about it, because even though I said, like, for you, you're right. The myth that we talk about in this show isn't there. But like you said, it's 30 years of that guy's career, right? And then regardless of what happened, this was his moment. And it's amazing. And I love how he guided you throughout the whole not do this, don't do this. Because you trusted him to actually jump into something that became real. So really, you took a long time to get to this point, even though you're one and done. You could have been 15 with the last one was good, right? But this guy helped you. Listen, yeah. I want to thank you. So interesting and fascinating, all the different things you're doing, and that you keep going, and you're a good person. You help a lot of people. You're going to help a lot of people on my show. So I appreciate that. And I can't tell you how much I'm happy that you did this. Is there anything people you want to know about you, where to find you, maybe something about your XOUT? I don't know, whatever you're allowed to say or not say.
No, look, XOUT is XOUTcapital.com is our website, and follow me on LinkedIn because I'll report on not just developments with XOUT, but also developments with Summer of Soul, which continues to be streamed on Hulu. It's streamed on Hulu if you want to watch it. And
streamed on Hulu.
And awesome. We're going to do a free screening in Harlem on June 17th, which is, we wanted to do it on Juneteenth, but that's a Sunday, and the park is limiting on what permits it gives out on Sunday. So in Harlem, it will be a free screening of the film on June 17th. And it's a great opportunity, not just to watch the film, but to watch the community watch the film, many of whom still do not know of its existence.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, David, thank you. I appreciate you being on the show.
It's my pleasure, and continued congratulations on your success with the podcast.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'll take your listener views down, but I think your other guests are going to keep bringing you up.
Thank you, bud. Thank you.